Morning, everyone. Welcome to the second of the CRIPS with Andy Black planning updates. We've called them. You probably noticed we called them places and spaces, and a couple of people said places and spaces. What's that about? Well, there's no magic in it. It's just Andy and I are very big jazz and music fans, and Places and Spaces is a Donald Byrd reference if anyone wants it. But we thought it was a good name to give it. It's an irreverent, informal look at the planning process. First up this morning, just a couple of thank yous. Firstly to Charlotte and Nicole, who've organised today and are filming and managing the webinar. So big thank you to them. And secondly, we talked about having music this morning as an intro. So why haven't we got some music? And suddenly Andy tells me that he's a jazz drummer in a band called the Horntown Project, who are playing at the Tramshed?
Tooting Tram and Social.
Tooting on next Wednesday. So there we go. There's a shout out,
yeah.
And a call out for you to attend that. What have we got today? Andy's going to give a little bit of an update on 5-year land supply. Going to be talking about some of the issues that have arisen with the Gove versus Khan battle, for want of a better word. Beth is going to think about some government changes to strengthen development in brownfield development. She won't be talking about Section 73, so I can hear the sighs of disappointment coming out there, but that's slash relief, possibly, but that's for another day. I think we'll save that. We've also got a special guest today, John Tarvett, who is Director of Planning at Waits Development, and we'll come to John in a moment. But before all of that, probably some headlines that are flying around at the moment. Biggest impact, I think, 2024 in terms of planning is going to be the election. It's a double election year in terms of both regional mayors and central government. And I come to remember an election where planning and housing policy seems to have featured so strongly. Probably you go back to '79 when we had the right to buy was floated as a time when planning and housing policy was so to the fore. Last night, obviously, we had by-elections, local government elections, regional and London mayor elections. Results are coming in, but we know that Labour rocked Blackpool. I'm sorry, that wasn't the pun that I've been trying to get in all week. So thank you for Labour for winning that. And I think they've made gains in a number of councils. So I don't think we will hear the regional mayor and the London mayor results until Saturday. But if the polling predictions are right, certainly in London, it's likely that we'll have a second term for a Labour London mayor. The potential for change, I mean, it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen in terms of the autumn election, but most people are saying that it is likely that there will be a Labour government, and certainly that the Labour Party has made it a core strategy and core pillar in its policy that housing and planning should feature very strongly. And I think unless something dramatic happens, it's likely that come October we will have a Labour government and a Labour London mayor. I think there was back in the early 2000s that was the case, but I think it is going to be significant. I think in terms of some changes that are going to come forward. I mentioned that we had Waits's planning director John Tarvett with us. The reason we invited him was because earlier this year, Wates produced and delivered to Number 10 a white paper called "Delivering the Homes Our Country Needs," and we thought it was a good moment to have a look at that, particularly in the light of the position we are in terms of elections. If you haven't read it, it's really worth a read. We're going to provide a link to it later, but it's a very accessible document. And when you go through it, it's difficult not to agree with the sentiments and the points that have been raised. So, John, welcome. Firstly, thank you for joining us this morning. I know you've got Hector the dog with you today. So if there's any off camera barking, we know who to blame for that. He may contribute, he may not. But thank you very much for attending this morning. I guess probably the point to start at with it is to give us a summary of the key points that you had in the white paper, which, as I said, is a very accessible. It's very easy read. What were the key points you raised?
Yeah, thanks, James. Thanks for the introduction, and hello everyone. And it's Friday, yay! Bank holiday week. Well, I think the first question is why have we done it? And I think when you look at Wates as a group, as a business, we're involved with all sorts of we're involved with government and the public sector at all different levels. So our construction business does an awful lot of public sector construction, from prisons to schools to government buildings, and so and my part of the business at Wates Developments, we're interacting with the planning system, both at the government level and at the local authority level. So it's really important for us to engage politically, and with the run up to an election, all the parties are all scrabbling around for ideas and things of on various topics. And one of the questions Labour particularly have been asking is how can we if we get into power, how can we move quickly in terms of delivering more homes? So that was the sort of catalyst really for the colleagues of mine in the wider group to start thinking about preparing some what we call white papers, which is a series of ideas on how we can get building increased and moving, and how can unlock the blockages. So we commissioned some external experts to help us. We had internal discussions, and various drafts were prepared, and ultimately the document you're referring to was published, and it was time to be used at the parliamentary at the party conference season in terms of sort of influencing, giving people ideas. I mean, Labour particularly are desperate for new ideas, things that they can latch onto and think about. So we prepared this paper that looked at what the problem was, what we thought were easy fixes, and then some other suggestions. And the key thing, I think, for anyone involved in the planning sector is certainty of planning, in terms of preparing local plans, certainty of investment decisions, when you can go, certainty of forecasting, all of those type of things all go down to the planning system and how long it takes to get planning consent. So there's a lot of that. I felt there's too much burden on local authorities to address all the things that are needed in relation to planning permissions, particularly around housing, BNG and all those type of things. And clearly there's a issue around local authority funding. So some of the ideas we came up that sort of got into the paper, I mean, they're not it's not rocket science, it's just just a neater, tidier, more efficient way of doing things, I think. And one of the easiest thing is just mandating and enforcing up-to-date local plans. Just if we're going to have a local plan-led housing system, and I think everyone agrees that that's the best way we should be doing it. Let's get local plans prepared, let's get them delivered, and get them up and running. I was with Lee Rowley earlier this week, and we had a small dinner, and one of the questions he was asking, what can we do? And we suggested, get local plans. He said, we're doing that. We've intervened. We've intervened in, I think, West Berkshire, and Andy would probably say where else he's intervened, but
Spelthorne as well.
Spelthorne. And my response to that was, well, it's all a bit late then, because you're doing it at the when it's going to committee with a committee decision. Do we do it, or do we approve this plan, or do we adopt it or not? You've got to get those authorities that are lagging behind in plan preparation. They're taking years over it to get moving.
I think one of the other things you pick up in it is the presumption. So if you've got a compliant plan and design code, that there will be a presumption in terms of the permission. It felt like that was a very simple, obvious way of providing some speed to what often is a very drawn out process, both in terms of the initial application and any reserved matters application that will follow it. And it as I said in the introduction, it's quite hard to argue against that.
Yeah, indeed. I think to go with that, James, because you need a design code. So perhaps there's an additional bit of work there at the local plan stage. But once that's there, our premise is, why it should just happen. The development should just happen. And our suggestion was that there's 13 weeks for the council to raise any particular issues, and therefore thereafter it's deemed consent. We also, if they did refuse it or had reason to reject, we put forward a suggestion for a streamlined appeal system. So there's sites that are allocated, or it's a renewal of an existing consent or something like that. They're rapidly pushed through the appeals system. It doesn't necessarily need a planning inspector at this stage, because we're not talking about anything complicated. The commercial, Andy knows about this better than I will, but the commercial planning appeal system has an express system where case officers decide the case, and the inspector just signs it off. As most local authorities work, and we felt that this could be again a quicker way of getting planning appeals through on sites that have been through the local plan stage and process, or in local plans, and there's no in principle reason why they shouldn't happen.
Yeah, I think one of the things you also pick up and don't shy away from, and this will ring true for everybody that's involved in any planning application at the moment, is that this has got to be properly funded. That local authorities are poorly resourced in terms of what they're asking to be done, and that unless that resourcing takes place, we're going to still have the sorts of difficulties that everybody encounters on a daily basis in terms of just making contact with the planning officer.
Well, I think it's inconceivable that the amount of money we spend on planning applications, that those fees aren't ring-fenced in local authorities. They disappear off to libraries and organising fetes and cream teas and parks and things like that. It's that money, and I think not every developer would say this, but for the right service and the right speed, we're probably prepared to pay a bit more. If we've got certainty, and if that money is kept within the local authority planning resource, just think what they could do, and they could budget accordingly. They can bring people in. They can get the right expertise to help with them. It'd be again a pretty easy and quick fix.
You can see the headlines tomorrow now, John. Waits call for increase in planning fees. I think you heard it here first, everyone.
Well, we do that, James, with PPAs and things like that. So it's for certainty of a decision, we'll pay a bit more.
Yeah. One thing as well, So on that bit on the presumed consent, I completely agree with that, and I think you do something well and you kind of do it once. But the problem with our planning system is then you're repeating things. People have that second bite of the cherry. We see things go away at like later stages. But I think that could follow right through as well. So one of the issues I'm sure you have, everyone has, is clearing conditions as well, that side of things. When someone like a Waits or a lot of people that are watching this, when you're persistently in a local authority delivering high quality developments, clearing kind of conditions, there's not a catch chance in hell that Waits or another high quality developer are going to do something badly. Yet you've got to go through and clear kind of conditions on each phase of your development as if it was a fresh time through. I think there's got to be a look at that, of how that can be better resourced within the planning system, because we get to a consent, then getting onto site sometimes can take as long as the consent process itself. And if we're talking about speeding up delivery, I think that sort of, it's got to be a root and branch approach, isn't it, really? So
yeah, it is. It goes a bit further than simply planning policy, and you stray into housing policy world in terms of modular homes and the provision of modular homes in terms of temporary housing, which I thought was very interesting, and that coordinated, comprehensive approach, that recognizing that planning is not just a planning issue. There are other policies that need to lead into that, particularly in terms of housing. I thought was very interesting. So I guess the big question is, what response have you had?
Well, we've not me personally, but other colleagues of mine within the group have definitely had meetings with Matthew Pennycook at Labour, and this has been put to him, and there have been ongoing discussions. Equally, Lee Rowley is still thinking that he may be in power by the end of the year, but it's certainly looking. He's quite a helpful chat. I quite like him. He's looking. Is there anything he's asking? Is there anything we could do now? Is there anything that we can help with? Now that it doesn't involve legislation or something. It's just perhaps a ministerial statement or something like that. So it's been well received. Whether or not these ideas, part of me thinks, do we need to fiddle with the planning system again? But
well, some people might say it's not radical enough, and it could have gone further. But maybe that's for another. That's for another white paper, maybe.
Maybe.
That probably leads us into a good point in terms of you, Andy, because you've spent the last 4 days on a local plan review.
Yeah.
Exciting, frustrating, enlightening.
All of the above, and it's resulted in, again, coming back to what John was saying earlier, they've adjourned that process for 5 weeks to kind of reconsider further evidence on trajectory. Again, it shows that process is not quick at all, and we've been several times I've been involved in local plan processes that take years and years, and it is years and years, to go through that process. Tandridge is a good example of something that took kind of 4 years to get precisely nowhere, really. And I think that's a big thing that's got to change as part of this whole thing. The amount of time it takes to get through things, and then for things to sort of, Spelthorne's another example. Going through a local plan process where then all of that time to get to a local plan that then the members decided to ditch all the greenbelt allocations. So it becomes very political, and it can get very drawn out. So
thanks, John, for that. Really good. As I said, I provided a link to the white paper so people can download it, have a look at it. It's good. It just makes perfect sense. It's just very, very straightforward. Very difficult to argue against it. But hang around, John, because hopefully we've got some very difficult questions coming in for you to consider.
I will hang around. I do have to disappear probably just before 9:30. I've got another meeting. But
that's fine. Thank you, John. And that leads us into Andy. Your look at where we are with 5 years, 4 years land supply.
Yeah, so I mean, when we last met and the last seminar we did, that was 2nd of February, actually. So at that point, NPPF was still fairly new. There was a lot that we were still getting to grips with. We had a chat about this paragraph, if you remember, where we've now got this scenario where it's not just about 5 years housing land supply. What the NPPF now says is if you've got 4 years housing supply, and effectively if you've gone through a Reg 18, Reg 19 local plan consultations, if you've got to include policies, map, proposed allocations. If you've got 4 years, then paragraph 11D, presumption in favour of sustainable development, doesn't apply, and that lasts for 2 years. So there was a lot to sort of unpack on that. It was all quite new, and we knew it was coming. And there was a lot of questions around how does that work? What does that actually mean? Is it kind of 4 years of 4 years? Is it 4 years of 5 years? So actually, not long after, only a couple of days after our seminar, the government set out further guidance in the planning practice guidance, which is on the next slide, and just sort of set out what they really meant by that. So this is a brand new bit of the planning practice guidance. And it effectively says that, in terms of demonstrating that 4 years, it's the same as how you calculate 5 years, and a little bit more clarity on that. What that has meant in practice, actually, a number of things. I know in one example, and I'm sure there's others, Wiltshire Council, they took applications back to committee, which had a resolution to grant, hadn't signed a Section 106, because they were allowing things under presumption. But as soon as this came out, they took things back to planning committee and subsequently refused them. Because that didn't apply anymore, which is quite a shocking thing. If you were sitting there with a resolution to grant and then you're told that doesn't happen, I mean, crikey, and luckily not one of mine, but there's plenty of other people that happened to. There was then an appeal decision which came out subsequently. It's on the next slide, which is quite interesting because it's not always the case. And this was an appeal decision in Charnwood Borough Council. And this was a case where they had just under 5 years, 4.5 years, and the local plan had been submitted for examination at the time that the appeal decision was made. And therefore, on the face of it, paragraph 11D wasn't triggered, the presumption wasn't triggered. However, in this instance, and it's worth a read through this appeal, the inspector then said, well, you've got to look at what paragraph 11D says. That also talks about policies which are most important for determining the application, whether they're out of date. And he went and then had a look at them. And the inspector said, well, actually, what you look at is the fact that those settlement boundaries were set at a time when the housing requirement was 557 dwellings a year. It's now over 1,000. So that setting of those settlement boundaries was done on an out-of-date policy. And therefore, the policies which restrict housing to settlement boundaries are out of date, and accordingly then went back and applied paragraph 11D in spite of what paragraph 226 says. Really good pragmatic appeal decision, and I think it shows that these things, good sites and it can still be made out in terms of arguments. You've got to look closely. Devil's in the detail. I think we'll probably continue to see things coming through on this, and probably the next time we meet, there'll be another update, I'm sure. Moving on, I wanted to talk a little bit more quickly about the tussle between Gove and Sadiq Khan. This is my, I think Beth's got some later. This is AI generated. If you put in Gove and Khan boxing in a ring, so it comes up. It's amazing AI generating things. I'm a bit obsessed with them. But so we talked last seminar. Gove had just written to Sadiq Khan outlining that he'd put his London plan panel to work on the London plan, and then he set out a further update in mid-February. And effectively, Gove is saying to Khan, look, you need to up your delivery. At the moment, you're delivering about 37,000 a year. It needs to be 62,000. So you've got some work to do. Rightly so. Sadiq Khan's kind of come right back at him and said, well, look, I'm not going to take lectures from you on housing supply. And it's gone into a real tussle. There's a further update, and I think we've got that letter, it's the front page of it, and that's in March. And effectively, Gove is now taking step-in powers that he has under the GLA Act, and he is formally starting a review of the London plan. And that review will take place, it's not 30th of April, actually, it's 30th of September. And he's concentrating on a number of things within that. Firstly, he's looking at industrial land very closely, and he's saying, look, you know, for every 1% of strategic industrial land that you release, you could free up capacity for 5,000 homes. And I want you to look again at how those policies work, and I'm directing you to review those policies. I don't think it actually really works like that. I don't think it's that simple. I don't think for 1 minute that releases the land that he's saying, but it'd be interesting to see what happens. He's also looking again at opportunity areas. There's 47 opportunity areas in the London plan. He's saying, well, look, you know, have a look again at how those can be optimized. How can we create more housing? He's pumping in £4 million into the Euston opportunity area. There's setting up a housing delivery group. And he's also sending in his planning super squad into Greenwich and Newham to sort of see what can be done. So there's real kind of things flying around here. There's things that are being used. It will be very interesting. I think this still has time to play and things to play out. We've got a picture of the planning super squad. Actually, this is what AI says if you put in the planning super squad into AI.
It's interesting. I think that's Matthew Pennycook's constituency, isn't it? Greenwich. So,
is it?
Yeah. So
okay,
maybe
I didn't know that.
Maybe that's to warm him up a bit.
There's the planning super squad. That's what it reckons they're going to look like. Now, what I thought, and I've blogged about this before, I thought it was very interesting in terms of that review of the London plan, and the fact that Greenbelt doesn't get a mention at all in any of those bits, and it was out with the scope of the London Review panel. And I picked up the London Plan report from the inspectors last time, and if you go to that the London Plan report, paragraph 599, so you've got to wade right the way through it. But at the end, and I just want to read this out because I think this is really interesting. This is what the inspector said. This was Roisin Barrett, who was examining the London Plan, said, the position in London is that capacity for new housing development is finite, right? Absolutely. Indeed, the plan relies on recycled land. The approach of sustainable intensification can only be taken so far without having an adverse impact on the environment, the social fabric of communities, and their health and well-being. So effectively, she was saying, look, you can only do this so much to a certain extent. And then said, therefore, in our view, there would be little to be gained from requiring an immediate review of the London Plan, which is what Gove's doing at the moment, until such time as a full review of London's Greenbelt has been undertaken. So that was the recommendations of Gove's inspector into the previous London Plan. So I find it quite surprising, actually, that this isn't. I mean, I'm not surprised, really. It's not on the agenda because it's obviously politically very difficult, but it's very unclear why that was out of the London Plan review scope. Quick thing onto that, we're waiting to see what happens with the mayoral candidates. We've got a picture of all of them, actually. We're pretty sure it's going to be Sadiq Khan that will be in. We've got Susan Hall, we've got my namesake Rob Blackie, I like his name, and Zoe Garbett of the Green Party. I think it's very interesting, and we were talking about this, and you've mentioned it, in terms of what Matthew Pennycook's saying. He's reiterated several times that if Labour come in, they would look at effectively reversing those recent Greenbelt changes, reversing the NPPF changes, and he's looking at a return to cross-boundary strategic planning. And I think that we're in a scenario, it feels like, potentially, are we about to see something really interesting where we've got Labour mayor, Labour government, return to strategic planning, maybe a look at the Greenbelt again? I think that could play out to something really exciting if it went that way. And last bit for me, obviously, I can't go without mentioning my favourite mayoral candidate, which is Count Binface. So this is the guy that's standing. He actually came, I think it was fourth last time or fifth. He came ahead of Piers Corbyn, Jeremy Corbyn's son, last time round. So it'd be interesting to see what he said. And his manifesto pledges, I'd love this. He wants to reintroduce CFAX, which I think is an excellent idea. checking the football scores on CFAX is my childhood. He wants to stop places being able to sell a croissant for more than £1.10 in London. Sounds crazy, right? But Greece did that with cheese toasties in 2010. Look it up if you don't believe me, and it works. It's a cost of living thing. I think while you're doing a manifesto, why not put something like this in? He wants to move the hand dryer in the Crown pub in Uxbridge to a better position. I mean, if you're writing a manifesto, why not do it? But one thing he did say, and I truly believe this, he said if he was elected as London Mayor, he would build at least one truly affordable home in London per year. And I think that gets my vote. So that's me.
Thanks, Andy. Beth, I think I mean, that links into some of the points that the white paper had picked up on, particularly in terms of green belt, which we hadn't mentioned. But I think you had a point for John about this cross-border issue and county councils and the position of county councils in the planning process.
Yeah, well, I was just really interested, John, in what you were saying about funding at a local authority level and how there just wasn't enough at the moment for local authorities to be making decisions, but then also the suggestion that actually what might happen is some planning decisions are elevated to a county council level. So, for example, for larger schemes, you'd have a sort of overarching decision making which came from the county level. And I just wondered how that might work in terms of its operation, and how that would then link through to housing targets. Because at the moment, what we see is you've got the local authority level, which need to provide houses in their area. They're incentivized to do that. And so from my perspective, where we're dealing with the planning agreements, we're dealing on the legal side, quite often it's the local authorities who you can gain some traction with and who engage at the kind of Section 106 negotiation process, and the county council who aren't incentivized in the same way to buy housing numbers are really problematic to work with. So I just was really interested in how that might change things.
John, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, if I've got to press a few buttons to get into this. Yeah, one of the ideas, one of the things that I personally struggle with is the way the standard methodology housing figure works for some local authorities that really, are really tight for land. If you accept the greenbelt's got to remain in some form, and going back in the day, Mole Valley, for instance, its annual housing requirement under the Surrey Structure Plan was something like 180 dwellings per annum or something like that, really low. Under standard methodology, it's 700, is it something like that per annum? Massive, and because of that, huge objection, and the plan's taking ages to go through the system. The suggestion in our white paper is that the standard methodology figure for all the local authorities in a county area are given to the county, and so you work it out where the constraints are, where the opportunity exists. Is there a case for more strategic thinking in terms of a new town, new village, whatever, in a location that could take housing need? It would deal with some of the duty to cooperate stuff that we're dealing with, and in reality, it's probably strategic planning through the back door. But it gives a better analysis of the best places within either a county area or a housing market area that where the housing could go, dealing with constraints, dealing with all the other issues that surround it. And that was the basis of that idea, Beth. And
well, that's really interesting. And some accountability at county level then in terms of delivering housing and having targets and numbers that they're concerned with.
No, I think once they've distributed the housing, as they would have done through a structural plan, and you could call it a county spatial plan or something like that, that those targets are rest with the local authority, because the requirement for those areas has been assessed based upon the constraints, and here's your housing. You go plan for that and develop a plan for that. In the meantime, we're going to put a new settlement over here that's going to deal with some of the other issues that as a county we're struggling with, and that was the basis of that thought. So the housing, the overall 3,000 homes per annum stays the same. It's just that we're finding the counties can find areas that can take more growth than some of the other more constrained areas.
And would they then be making decisions at a county level? So, say for example,
well, someone's got to work it all out, and they're whether or not the second planners from local authorities to work with the county, or the county rebuild their. Surrey used to have a massive planning department dealing with spatial strategy. Whether or not there's a rebuild, but yeah, it's just the standard methodology is a blunt tool in terms of allocating housing. And it doesn't really take in all the constraints that exist. And the urban uplift for places like Reading, an extra 35%. They're never going to be able to. It needs to go to, like it has done over the years. It needs to go to Woking. It needs to go to Oxfordshire. It needs to go to places to meet that housing need.
And in many areas as well, as Mole Valley, Elmbridge, that standard methodology is a capped figure as well. So if you take the cap away, the actual housing need that is chucking out is enormous, and it just can't be. I think there is an acceptance that it can't be accommodated in many kind of greenbelt constrained authorities, but then there's examples of other authorities that have done the heavy lifting, like Guildford, Runnymede, Windsor, Maidenhead, where they've made difficult decisions to allocate greenbelt sites. Then you have this weird scenario where others make the decision not to do it, and I think having a overarching strategy for a county to say, look, the expectation is that everyone has to do an element of the heavy lifting. This is your housing figure, and we can't have a scenario where one person's going to be meeting it and another person's not. That seems unaccountable, doesn't it? And what we're talking about is accountability, and I think that's exactly right.
But big resource issues, though. Again,
huge.
That would need to be funded. The thought of planning officers being seconded from districts to the county would probably scare people at the moment in terms of are there any? But it needs to be properly resourced, and that's a theme that I think is.
Labour is suggesting 900 more planning officers into the system, so maybe they just need to go to different places.
Yeah, they may do. Beth, you were gonna you've spared us section 73, but Brownfield first is your.
Well, I thought it would just follow on quite neatly after my focus on Greenbelt and Greenfield at the last webinar. You'll remember that the then new paragraph 145 of the NPPF and it related to review of Greenbelt boundaries by LPAs as part of their plan making. Particularly, I considered the messaging that came with these NPPF amendments and questioned whether the government was indicating to local authorities or to politicians or members within those authorities that they didn't need to worry about meeting their housing need if it was going to involve Greenbelt review and Greenbelt release. So, I mean, seamlessly following on from that, the government published a press release in February, which announced that building homes on brownfield land would be essentially turbocharged under a kind of shake-up of planning rules to boost housing. And they tacked on to the end, importantly, while protecting the greenbelts. So what we have is Michael Gove saying the government are going to take a brownfield first approach to deliver thousands of new homes. He says these are places where people want to live and work, and they can do that without concreting over the countryside. So I think the first slide, what we're looking at is, the changes which are being introduced or consulting on, and just a brief summary, are the immediate extension of current permitted development rights, and that's the first slide, which I'll come on to. A strengthening of policy for prioritising the use of brownfield land, which I'll consider next, and then further consultation on other changes to permitted development rights, which would, if they go ahead, allow for further extension of residential and commercial buildings. So the first slide we've got up there with the redundant redundant office block is the first change we're looking at. It's the immediate extension of current permitted development rights. So from 1st of March this year, changes to these rights took effect, and they removed 2 key restrictions relating to the change of use from commercial, business and service premises to residential use. The changes removed 2 quite significant barriers to obtaining prior approval for a change of use. And the first is the mandatory 3-month vacancy requirement. And the second is the 1,500 square metre maximum floor space limit for buildings. So previously we had a scenario where a building had to remain vacant for 3 months before the change of use process could be started. And with the removal of this requirement, owners can now apply for a change of use without any delay to demonstrate vacancy. Additionally, removing this 3-month vacancy requirement means that buildings can undergo conversion while still being occupied as well, which I think will be quite important. Removing the size limit also means that buildings of any size within Class E can now use this permitted development right. So the change will open up new possibilities for residential conversion projects, particularly for large buildings. So you're looking at multi-storey office buildings or commercial complexes, which suddenly fall into that realm of consideration. While the intention of the modifications is to create greater flexibility and simplify the prior approval process, there are still, and it's worth remembering, various protections which will apply, including the requirement for new dwellings to meet nationally described space standards, to consider the impact of noise from commercial premises on intended occupiers to be considered. And there's quite a lot around the agent for change principle that comes with that. The provision of adequate natural light in habitable rooms, and the need for prior approval where it's necessary for this to be obtained. And this is not always as straightforward as it may sound in terms of obtaining that. So the fact that there remain restrictions on certain buildings and locations means that it's not going to be immediate that these conversions will be happening. In addition, there are concerns, I think, probably at a local authority level. You've got the case that these Class MA conversions will not be subject to requirements for affordable housing and contributions to schools and health provision. And so I think there is some concern that new dwellings are being provided without the necessary infrastructure, without the necessary support that would come with them. And local authorities, I think, have indicated that they may be keen to try and withdraw permitted development rights by implementing new Article 4 directions. But it's you've got to be mindful of the fact that these will take some time to take effect. And while the government is being as vigilant as it can in modifying these orders, where it considers they are wider, these Article 4 directions, where it considers they may be wider than appropriate, it will be important for anyone seeking to put an application in to monitor any upcoming restrictions closely.
It's almost like that was an own goal, really, wasn't it, in terms of ignoring the affordable housing contribution, because it was going to lead to those sorts of applications going in.
Well, also, I think previously, because the upper size limit is 1,500 square metres, wasn't it? So you weren't ever going to get necessarily a huge amount, but now they've taken it off. You could feasibly get a massive office building that's still occupied as well, by the way, and then someone just says, right, you lot are all out, and then you could get hundreds and hundreds.
Yeah, I'm surprised there was nothing in the associated consultations with these changes that queried whether or not there should be some link to making contributions associated with these conversions, particularly, as you say, once you're looking at larger scale developments. And the school places, the healthcare provision, and those things which would typically come with developments of that size just won't be there.
Yeah.
In relation to my second slide, okay, so the government intends to instruct councils in England to prioritise brownfield developments and be more flexible in applying policies that prohibit house building on brownfield land. There was a recent consultation which ended on the 26th of March, and this sought views on the proposed approach to updating planning policies relating to brownfield land in the NPPF. as well as reviewing the threshold for referral of applications to the Mayor of London. And there is some significant crossover between this and the London Plan Review as well. The three proposals identified in the consultation document were the first being changes to national planning policy to give significant weight to the benefits of delivering as many homes as possible and taking a flexible approach in applying planning policies relating to the internal layout of development. So that's a kind of density point, I think, in terms of delivering more houses. The government's proposing a change to make it clear that when local planning authorities are considering planning applications, significant weight should be given to the benefits of delivering as many homes as possible, especially involving land which has been previously developed. And the second is the changes to the way the housing delivery test operates in the 20 towns and cities, subject to the 35% uplift in the standard method. And Andy, you've touched on this for London, but what it would introduce is an additional presumption where the housing delivery test scores fall below 95%. The presumption in favour of sustainable development is applied in specific circumstances, including as a result of the housing delivery test, which assesses how well local authorities are delivering against their housing requirement. The housing delivery test is an annual measurement of housing delivery in the area of the relevant local authority. Where this applies a sequential approach to local authorities scoring below 95%, they'll have to produce an action plan, and below 85% having to apply a buffer, and below 75% being subject to the presumption. I don't know if you want to go into that in any more detail, given the time constraints, but what they've looked at is how they would introduce this, and the proposal is the change could be made through amendments to footnotes, where we like to find all our information in the NPPF. The third was a review of the threshold for referral of applications to the Mayor of London. The current threshold is 150 residential units. In the consultation notes, it notes it as low, a request that views are sought on a higher threshold. And they consulted on options for 300, 500, 750 and 1,000. And they were put forward for
500 was what it was when it first came in.
Yeah.
They put it down. So
yeah. So it'd be interesting to see. I mean, there's no reporting yet that's come out of that consultation. I don't know if you're aware of any timescales yet, but the speed at which these things materialise has been varied. On the next slide, we further looked at consultation of other changes to permitted development rights. So this is just closed, actually. And what they're looking at is allowing greater development in a number of areas. They've looked at changes to householder development, but what I focused on in this review is the upward extension of existing buildings. So the changes here would see the age limit of buildings that can have floors added to them extended. So they may apply to those that have been constructed before the 1st of July 1948, which is the current threshold. So that may be either by imposing an alternative date, i.e. that they wouldn't apply to buildings constructed before 1930, or alternatively removing the age limit entirely. The intention being that this change would bring more buildings into scope, and they would be able to benefit from these rights. One of the existing building upwards permitted development rights allows for the construction of new homes on a freestanding block of flats. The right allows for the construction of up to 2 additional stories. I think it's a 7 metre in height limit, where the maximum height of the extended building is no more than 30 metres. The permitted development right for building upwards on a freestanding block of flats currently includes a requirement that the developer must provide the council with a report for the management of construction of this development. So it would set out, for example, how the proposed development hours of operation would work, how many adverse impacts, for example, like noise, dust, vibration, those sort of things would be managed for the existing occupier, traffic generation, those sort of things for the existing occupiers of the building and adjoining occupiers. And the prior approval process also requires the consideration of the impact on the amenity of existing buildings and neighbours. But there continue to be reports of issues with structural and utility safety afforded to existing residents who live in blocks when additional floors are added. And so the government is currently seeking views on the continued operation of these rights and whether or not additional protections could be put in place. Finally, an existing permitted development right, it's Class A, Part 7, allows for extensions or alterations of a building in a commercial, business or service use. This includes offices, you've got research and development buildings, industrial processes, and it allows these premises to extend subject to conditions and limitations. Under the current restrictions, the gross floor space of the original building cannot increase by more than 50% or 100 square meters, whichever is less. In a separate consultation which closed in September 2023, the government had proposed to increase the maximum size of extensions permitted from no more than 50% to 100 square meters, whichever essentially was less. And as far as I can see, there's been nothing further that's been decided in relation to this. I don't think anything's popped up, but that once again would be another change, which is essentially be allowing greater development, greater flexibility within brownfield land. Then next slide. So I'm just looking generally. So a presumption in favour of brownfield development. The government considers that its new brownfield presumption will tackle under delivery of housing in key towns and cities where it's needed and protect the countryside and greenbelt. The intention is that reforms will support developers aiming to undertake major regeneration on brownfield sites. I think by giving them more certainty, by ensuring their plans are not necessarily blocked or held up by red tape. The London Plan Review calculated that a brownfield presumption in the capital could potentially result in between 4,000 and I think it's about 11,500 additional homes per year. Further, it's expected the extension of current permitted development rights will allow greater flexibility for buildings to be extended and converted. But the flip side to this is you've got concerns. We know that there's been criticism that we know it's been pointed out already that the National Planning Policy places weight on brownfield first approach already. And many brownfield sites have planning permission but are not being built out for other reasons. So the sites are likely to be more constrained. They require complex land assembly and remediation work, all of which impacts on viability and the speed at which development can be delivered. Converting some shops and office spaces into homes has already been an option as well for some time, but it's probably fair to say that application of these permitted development rights has come with mixed results. And so in our experience advising clients who've been involved in this, the process hasn't been quick, albeit that there's permitted development rights in place. So while the proposed changes will likely encourage the delivery of new homes and a step in the right direction, I think it's recognised there remains a real need for long-term vision, and particularly as John was saying, a housing strategy that will match demand. So the planning system needs to offer more certainty to enable greater investment to be secured and for more homes to be delivered, not just in brownfield urban areas. Last slide. I'm not sure my attempts at AI imaging have been as successful as yours, Andy. I used one where you just had to type in a description. I don't know if you've got any idea of who these people are.
I think you guessed that the one on the left was me before I had a coffee.
That was my initial attempt.
So thanks for that.
Is that going to be Angela Rayner?
Yes.
Why has she got a trowel in her hand? She's digging the green belt.
Digging up the green belt. Thanks, Beth. That's really good. Really good. I wonder whether or not it linked in also with Roisin's Barrett's comments in terms of there being a finite supply, and that it will if we're gonna use brownfield, it has other implications.
Yeah.
I've cut you off a bit short. We've got some questions coming in. Is that okay?
Yeah,
we're running out of time. A number of questions in. First question I can deal with quite comfortably, which is what is the name of John's dog and has he got an Instagram page? Well, it's Hector, and yes, we'll give you the link to that later. Second more serious question. Any thoughts on Reigate and Banstead's recent decision to determine their local plan as being up to date for the next 5-year period, despite the 5-year period going beyond their remaining plan? Andy, that's probably for you.
Yeah, and as that person says, they did the same exercise in 2019, and this, well, I mean, maybe I wasn't paying attention, but it came out of nowhere. Reigate and Banstead just held a committee meeting, I think it was last month, or might be in February, and just said we need to review our plan, and we've reviewed it and it's fine. And there you go. And then that's it for another 5 years. And it just seems like they got away with that before. Their housing target, or within their plan, is woefully low. It's based on the South East plan. It protects the green belt, and again, Reigate and Banstead seem to have done this thing where they can just roll that over, get all the protections that the NPPF gives them as a result. Contrast that with Guildford. Guildford's reviewing their plan, and they did that back in February or March. There was a committee meeting, a council meeting, and they've taken it much more seriously. And they've said, actually, there are changes that have occurred, because that's what the NPPF says you've got to do. You've got to look at what's happened. Is it different? And it is different for Guildford. The housing requirements more. Equally, some of their sites that we're going to deliver early in the plan period haven't. And the councillors, partly surprising for me, said, no, we do need to review our plan and we do need to look at other things. So again, talking about that different approach, very different between Reigate and Banstead, as that person rightly says, can the government intervene? Yes, they can intervene. Whether they will, I don't know. They should, definitely. I think that we need a much more level playing field, and that's just two Surrey boroughs taking very, very different approaches. So yeah, well put that. So
another question coming up, which is, does the panel think Labour's grey belt idea has put the foot in the door, opening up the potential for a more comprehensive green belt review? And what is grey belt anyway? Well, I think grey belt comes, the phrase I think has come from Keir Starmer talking about building on car parks in the green belt. Where he's going to find those car parks, I'm not quite sure, and whether or not that is the sort of the green belt review that we need, or that we're calling for. Again, I'm not sure, but Andy or Beth, you.
Well, I think the grey belt. So it's they've coined a term, haven't they? It's ex-industrial land. I think they've included within it low quality scrub land as well. So it doesn't necessarily have to be brownfield. But I think it's right. I think it's a way of making perhaps the opening up of green belt more palatable. I think what you're talking about is reassurance that actually the green belt review isn't going to take away the quality spaces, the green open areas that people rely on. And it's a way of presenting what's going to be a contentious and hard-fought topic when it comes to green belt review. But I think Labour currently have stood by a commitment to undertake a form of review at this stage. They've made that quite clear as part of their housing policy. So hopefully it will happen if the government are continuing their supportive messaging around the scope of those reviews.
Yeah, I mean, my worry is that those sites don't necessarily bring forward the most sustainable sites. If you've got a kind of scrapyard, yes, it's grey belt, but it might not be the most sustainable site to bring forward. And sometimes if you've got a green belt site, it might even be higher performing. But if you can hit the town centre with a 7-iron from that, well, that should be looked at, and those sorts of sites. So I think it's a more nuanced approach. So
it's focus first, aren't they? They're not saying it's just grey belts. Yeah. So I mean, hopefully it will take into account other considerations as well.
Yeah, but I think the idea that's the solution is perhaps a bit misguided. It needs a more thorough, a more comprehensive review. We're coming to the end of today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, John. Really enjoyed the contribution today. Thanks, Beth. Thanks, Andy.
James.
Watch out for the updates that we send out on a regular basis. We will be, as I said, providing the link to the white paper and to Hector's Instagram account. And more sessions planned. Look forward to seeing you then.